Well, good evening, ghosts, ghoulies, and goblins. Happy Halloween. I'm Tad. I'm here. That's enough, right? I mean, I hope that's enough. That's all I got, folks. This point is just getting there. Getting here, and as everybody says, 90% of life is just showing up. So instead of being out trick or treating, getting my mitts on a bunch of fun sized Snickers bars and little tiny Reese's peanut butter cups and all those things that are the spoils of Halloween for those who can go out and get them. I'm here. I'm here. I'm home, and that's not a complaint. That's just a fact. Before we start things here, and I see already some people have showed up and greeted us. I realized as I was prepping up for the show tonight that it's Halloween, and I hadn't even thought about reading a scary story or anything. And I do have a couple of my stories that I've never read, which are different kinds of slightly scary stories. So I could read one of those, or I could continue with Dragons of Ordinary Farm. So I want to know who would like to, if anybody out there wants to read scary stories. So drop me a quick comment, and I can read a scary story, or I can continue with Dragons of Ordinary Farm, which probably has some scary bits in it, although I don't know what's coming up necessarily in the next section. I don't remember off the top of my head. So drop me a quick comment, please, if you would like to do. Sorry, I'm just laughing at Jared's comment about it's good to see that I wore the scariest mask for tonight. Yes, I did. You think it's scary for you. Just think about looking at it in the mirror. Anyway, so just quickly, while we're chit-chatting at the beginning here, drop me and vote for Ordinary Farm or Scary Stories, or a scary story. And because I have one of those that I can read also. In the meantime, what have I been keeping people up to date on? Work is work, still working, cranking away, all but finished now with Into the Narrow Dark. Probably another few days at the most, and then I'm going to be sending it off, and I can crash back into Navigator's Children, because of course there's still a little bit of there's still, well, a chunk of the ending that still has to be written, but also I have to now reintegrate or integrate all the changes that I've made in the volume of Into the Narrow Dark now have to be integrated into Navigator's Children as well. I will also, despite the fact that all of you have seen this already, I will show you, just because I so seldom have something that I can show people. Yay! New book. And the lovely dragon on it. And all kinds of stuff like that. That's what's coming out now. And since most of you are in the States, it's not that far away. We just found out that the English edition is going to be about a month later because of shipping, transportation issues, etc., etc. What else? We have finished our brief but extremely impressive and severe downpour of rain that we had for a few days, which was notable, of course, because California has been bone dry for months. And it was a great relief to our local vegetation, but it made Johnny the big dog miserable. He hates the rain. It's not the rain. He doesn't mind even being out in it that much, but he hates the sound of it on the roof. He's very sound sensitive. So he was just miserable for several days, and just, he would just give me the look. He has this whale-like expression. If you ever see when people are like swimming alongside a whale or shooting footage from a boat of a whale, and the whale rolls up, and you kind of see that big eye and a little bit of white around the edges, and the whale is kind of looking at you with a sort of sad, "Why are you ruining our oceans?" look. That's Johnny when anything is happening that I'm not fixing. I cannot fix the rain. Johnny does not realize that, so Johnny lies there on the bed, kind of quivering and giving me that side eye. Why is it raining, and why aren't you doing something about it? But he's a little bit better now, and Since we've had a few days of sun, I took him out for a walk today and got out of the house myself, which is always a good thing to do. Deb and I had our anniversary, which we celebrated yesterday. I think it was actually on the 27th, if I remember correctly. But we celebrated our anniversary, which was nice. Not that we did a whole lot, but, we did go out and went to dinner, which is, just a really nice thing to be able to do after all that pandemic that we've been living through. So, what else? Oh, here. I just saw this. Kenneth Kelly wants to know, is that a gorilla wearing a bowler hat behind you? Well, what a silly thing to say, Kenneth. Yes, actually, it's a gorilla. Gorilla wearing a bowler hat. Yes, it certainly is. There's the bowler hat, which my friend Lisa gave me. And this is Coco. And I think I may have told this story in the past. Coco was a present from my publisher when I finally finished To Green Angel Tower. 7 years till the finish of that trilogy, so-called trilogy. And my publisher, Betsy Walheim, sent it to me as a gift to commemorate getting the monkey off my back. Those were her words. So Coco has been with us ever since. She is modeled on Coco, the late beloved sign language gorilla. I've had her for almost, well, geez, you can figure out how long that was, back to the early 90s. So I've had her a very long time. So she's kind of a little raggedy in places. Anyway, so let me see if we've got to... Dragons, scary, scary, for scary, scary, scary. Okay, we've got scary is out, although it's somewhat close, but scary so far is out distancing the others. So anybody else wants to put in a vote for scary versus Dragons of Ordinary Farm? I will, of course, continue to read Dragons of Ordinary Farm, depending on how long tonight's story is. I might even read a little bit of it tonight. But this is not like I'm going to stop reading Ordinary Farm. I just realized it was Halloween, and I don't have a jack-o'-lantern. I don't have a costume except for my shirt, which was skinned off a live Yeti. Poor beast suffered terribly, but that's what's going to happen to you when you're a cryptid. You got nobody to defend you. Cryptids have no rights. There's a story idea. Anyway, so anybody wants to throw in a last vote in the next couple of minutes before I actually check in and grab something up to read? And what else? Anything else to talk about? No, just the usual. Just the usual stuff we've been doing here. Everybody's pretty much the same. Checked in with a friend of ours in England today, and had an online conversation. Skyped. We Skyped, and yeah, and then I found some time to work, and I took Johnny out. So that's been my Halloween. And since none of the kids are young enough anymore to go out trick-or-treating, I am going to be bereft of candies because, of course, through many years of trick-or-treating, even on the times I didn't go with them because I was like away at World Fantasy Convention, which is always held on Halloween, there would be a dad tax levied on Halloween candy. But I can't levy a dad tax on Halloween candy that has not been collected. So it's sad. It's very sad. Anyway, anything else of interest to tell? No, not really. Okay, we got dragons, scary, scary, scary. Yes, I wrote the story in question. Scary. Let's see. And then people have veered off of that subject. Dragon for Ordinary Farm. Jeremy votes for Scary Dragons, which is just no help whatsoever. God, we're like evenly split. Okay. We got about 2 minutes left, and then I'm going to have to close it out. So I don't really mind. I will eventually read the rest of the Dragons of Ordinary Farm anyway. So I'm cool, whatever we do. Well, not cool, but, cool in the sense of I'm okay. I'm good, which in real life I'm not. I am decidedly and perversely and really hardworkingly wicked. I have tried very, very hard to be wicked in my life. I think I've told you this story, but I'll tell it again anyway while I'm waiting for people to vote who would like to vote on what we're going to read tonight. When our son Connor was very, very, not very, very young, but like 10, 11 years old, he was, I would always tease him because my great ambition in life was always to be a James Bond villain, so, or a superhero, super villain, and, have a volcano lair and all that stuff, and neoprene clad minions serving my every need, and lasers aimed at the moon, and, all that stuff. And I used to tease Connor about it because he was such a good hearted child. And so I don't remember what the context was, but one day I was saying to him, Connor, because he had made it very clear early on that he liked girls, that, that he was straight. And which is, I wouldn't force it on him otherwise, but he had made it clear that, when he got older, he was going to marry a female person. So I said to him, well, honey, if you really want to get the chicks, supervillain, babe, supervillain. You got to be evil. You got to have all the good stuff. You got to have the secret submarine base and everything. And young Connor looked at me and said, "Nuh-uh, Dad. I'm going to get girls with manners and mathematics." I said, "Bless you, my son. You're too good for this world, and you're certainly too good for this family." Anyway, okay, let's see if we've had any more votes in here in the last moment. Dragons. Okay, oh wait, I've already saw that one. Dragons, all right. No, come on, don't do this to me. Dragon. Okay, we've got another dragon vote. And I think we have a small margin for dragons. So I guess we're going to do dragons tonight, guys. And that's fine with me. Okie dokie. But I'll try and do it in a really spooky voice. Chapter 22. That's kind of a Dracula voice. Chapter 22. I could do more of a Boris Karloff. Chapter 22. Anyway, okay. So we are, because we didn't have a sufficiency, I'm not going to overrule. We had, if anything, slightly more dragons. So we're going to do dragons. So chapter 22. Let me move this in closer. There you go. And it says, it's called At Last, come on, At Last Some Answers is the name of that chapter. And for some reason, I can't get it to point at me properly. Chapter 22. And that's where we're going. Uncle Gideon was wearing his bath. Oh, I haven't said hello to people yet. I have to do that before I start reading. Buggery. Sorry, guys. I'm slow because I got into the whole thing about what I should read. Okay, who is out there? And Ray is top of the hill. No, Ray, you're not top of the hill here, I don't think. Oh, God, this is so confusing. Once again, doesn't work well. Okay, Ray, hello, greetings to you. Good to have you. Kristen, good to see you. Emily, good to see you. No, where's the rest of the comment? Oh, God, is this thing messing up my comments again? Oh, God, it is. It's doing the comments all weird. Okay, chapter 22 of what? Oh, okay, good question. Comment settings. All viewers can... Yeah, everybody can participate. Where did the early comments go? I really, really cannot stand this particular interface. I hope I've made that clear by now. I hope I've made that clear. Half the comments have now disappeared. I have no idea where they are. So I apologize for everybody I'm not going to be able to say hello to because the comments have disappeared. So Claudia, hello. Kenneth, good to see you. Barban, Kristen, Kelly, Jeremy, hello. Jared, good to see you. Stacy, ooh, nice. Pleasure to see you, Stacy. Emily, yay, good to see you. Carl, Medardo, amigo mío, bienvenidos y muchas gracias para sus felicitaciones. Kristen, I already said hi to. Becca, You thought Johnny was one of my kids. Johnny is my kid. Deborah calls him John, the writer's son, Kristen. So in a sense, Johnny is. He's very attached to me. Dale, hello. Good to see you. Stacy, if I didn't say hello to you already, then I say hello to you too. And happy anniversary. Jeremy already said hello. Chris, hello from Northern Germany. Well, you're in Northern Germany. I'm in Northern California. Tim, good evening. Emily, I think I already said hello, but just in case I didn't, hello. Maria Jose, hello, and greetings to Spain. A pleasure to see you. And who else have we got here waiting? Gina, hello, Gina. Chapter 22 of Dragons of Ordinary Farm is what we're reading. The book that the young adult, all ages, whatever you want to call it, book that Deborah and I wrote together. We've actually written two, and we're still working on the third one. Oh, God. Mark, hi, buddy. Good to see you. James, hello. Love you too, bud. Nice to have you. Jeremy, can I do Ordinary Farm as narrated by Vincent Price? I've never tried a Vincent Price voice. I'm not sure I can do it, but, if I think of it, I'll think of it. Anyway, okay, so now I've said hello to the people that I know are here. Although, no, I saw Jerry in there earlier, too. But obviously those comments have disappeared for some unfathomable reason that seems to be just because Facebook and Chrome just really enjoy pissing me off. I don't know why that is, why they can't just be nice to me. I was nice to them until they started messing with me. Anyway, okay, so now we're back to Dragons of Ordinary Farm. If you will recall, in the last chapter, well, you might not recall because this is what I read last night. The last chapter that I read, Tyler actually stumbled into the fault line, was trapped in darkness, couldn't figure out where he was. There was no kind of up or down or anything. And at last, by sheer concentration, he managed to find his way into what turned out to be the Ice Age. And there saved and was saved by a young Paleolithic woman named Last One, and brought her back with him, got into a big fight with Colin Needle, who is very upset because he couldn't believe that Tyler could actually manage to find his way through the fault line and back without any kind of device. We learned that. But then after Colin got into a fight with Tyler, and Last One, the Paleolithic gal, bopped Colin on the head with a rock. And then when Lucinda had also showed up and Colin realized he could not afford to make a big stink about things because of some stuff that he was doing himself that he didn't want to be brought to attention. So anyway, that's where we are. So we have now learned something about where all these critters and people come from, which is out of the fault line, hidden underneath the old silo, which apparently was never actually a silo. Anyway, chapter 22, at last some answers. Uncle Gideon was wearing his bathrobe and slippers as usual. Several days' growth of gray beard furred his cheeks, and he smelled more than a little stale, like clothes that had been hanging in a damp bathroom for a couple of days. Still, his wit seemed as sharp as ever. After Tyler finished telling his story, or at least the carefully crafted version Colin had prepared, in which Tyler was an innocent victim of the fault line, instead of someone who had broken the rules to explore the silo, Gideon stared at him for several moments with open suspicion. It was all Tyler could do not to squirm under that disbelieving gaze. He didn't like letting Colin Needle call the shots on this, but he was glad he didn't have to tell anyone about Octavio Tinker's diary or any of the other things he and Lucinda had collected. And, now that he was facing his great-uncle's mistrustful gaze, Tyler had to admit that the last thing he wanted to be telling Gideon Goldring was the actual truth. Well, that's quite some news, Gideon said at last, straightening in his chair. So the fault line is active again. Just conjured up an ice age for a few minutes and spewed out this young woman. How lucky for you, Tyler, that the manifestation barely touched you. How lucky for all of us. I don't know what I would have told your mother if we'd lost you, instead of gaining a new farmhand. He looked entertained by that idea in a sour sort of way, then grinned at Tyler and Lucinda. "But now you two know our biggest secret. You should be honored." Tyler was still shivering a little. Honored? I could have been killed. In all the excitement, that fact had kind of escaped him until now. Okay, maybe it was my own fault, but they ought to have warning signs up around that thing. Most of the farm folk had gathered in the kitchen. The cave girl had already fallen into the gentle clutches of Sarah and the rest of the kitchen staff, who had taken her off to bathe her and dress her in something more suitable to a California summer than her heavy, greasy animal hides. Tyler wondered whether she would really become a farmhand. Obviously, no one had asked the girl whether that was what she wanted. As if sensing Tyler's thoughts, Gideon said, "Now, what shall we name our newest arrival?" "She's got a name. She's called Last One." "What sort of name is that for a modern young woman?" Gideon chuckled. "No, we'll call her... I know. We'll call her Ula. That was the name of the caveman Alley-Oop's girlfriend in the Sunday comics. Quite appropriate for a young Paleolithic lady, don't you think?" Tyler had no idea what the crazy old fellow was talking about, but he was too tired and too grateful not to be in trouble to argue about it. "Why can't she talk our language anymore?" he asked. "When I met her, I could understand her, and she could understand me too." "Ah, but she never could speak our language," said Gideon. "While you're in the field of the fault line, there is a sort of, I don't know, instantaneous translation that goes on. Mind to mind. So that although both parties might be speaking completely different languages, their own languages, they can still understand each other. I think it's one of the ways in which the flow of time protects itself. That is, it lessens the potential for something catastrophic happening. Prevents paradoxes." Gideon warmed to his subject, as if he was beginning to enjoy himself a little. "If you were to sit on top of the fault line, always assuming that you actually could, and it was a day in which there was no, activity there, then you'd probably be able to understand each other again, because there's usually a leakage of energy in the immediate vicinity." He grew stern again. "Don't even think about trying that, young man." "I won't," said Tyler. "I promise." That's also the reason cell phones and even regular telephones and other electronic things don't always work right around here. It's the fault line." He shook his head. "No, young Ula will just have to learn English like Sarah and Ragnar and all the others did. Don't worry, we've done all this before." "So everyone hears from the past?" Lucinda asked. Tyler looked at Ragnar and the herdsmen, the three amigos, who were talking in quiet voices at the table a few yards away. No sign of Mr. Walkwell yet, he couldn't help noticing. He wondered how he was supposed to treat the man now that he knew Mr. Walkwell had goat legs. It was all pretty weird. "The past, more or less," said Gideon, but the old man suddenly looked a little cagey. "To be honest, not even my grandfather Octavio knew exactly how the fault line works for all his research. He believed it might open not just on other times, but on alternate versions of Earth as well." He chewed the inside of his cheek. "So far, I've only observed time rifts, but who knows? We're at the leading edge of a science no one else has even dreamed of." Pride deepened his voice. "Then why are you keeping it a secret?" Lucinda asked. "Shouldn't there be people here? Scientists from all over the world?" "Good God, child, are you mad?" Gideon sat up in his chair as if someone had just tried to steal the bathrobe right off his skinny back. "It wouldn't be scientists, it would be the government.
And they wouldn't just be studying it, they'd be trying to figure out how to use it, trying to change the past. Who knows? Next thing, the entire fabric of time and space would collapse. Hand it over to the so-called authorities? Not bloody likely. But what are you doing with it, Uncle Gideon? Lucinda asked. Tyler was impressed. He'd never seen his sister so serious about something that didn't have commercial breaks and well-known guest stars. Why do you get to be in charge of something so big, so important? Gideon flushed. Because Octavio Tinker discovered it all by himself. He tried to get the government's help when he was first searching for it, and they laughed at him. Every university in America treated him like he was a crackpot. It belongs to the Tinkers. It belonged to me and my wife, and I'm going to hold on to it. Thank you very much. He had gone from calm to quivering in a few moments. And just because you know about it now, girl, don't think that you can tell me what to do with my own property. If someone called the government in here tomorrow, you know what they'd get? Nothing. Because I've got enough dynamite to blow the whole thing into a heap of dirt. And I'd do it gladly before I'd let anyone waltz in here and start telling me how the fault line should be used. He wasn't just trembling now. He was red in the face and breathing hard. For a moment, Tyler felt certain that Gideon Goldring was going to reach out and grab his sister by the throat. "Your tea, Gideon," said Mrs. Needle. She'd swept in without Tyler even noticing, appearing behind the old man's chair like a magic trick. "Don't shout at Lucinda. She's a good girl, and she's just concerned about doing the right thing." She gave his sister one of her cold smiles, but for once Lucinda didn't respond, looking away as though she didn't want to meet the Englishwoman's eye. "You're right, of course, Patience." Gideon looked at his tea, but didn't touch it. "It's all a bit much, that's all." "Of course. You have a tremendous responsibility, Gideon." Mrs. Needle laid a pale hand on his shoulder. "A real burden. You have decisions to make. There is a great weight on you right now." The hand looked like a white tarantula. Gideon shook his head, suddenly calmer, even a bit weary-looking. "In any case, now you kids know the greatest of our secrets here at Ordinary Farm. I'm sorry you had to wait so long, but as Patience so aptly puts it, it's a tremendous responsibility. Now you really are part of the family." Tyler nodded, but part of him wondered what that meant exactly. They had already been part of the family when they arrived, which was more than any of the rest of these people could say. He looked around at the group. The three amigos and Ragnar and the others seemed to be in a cheerful mood, as if the truth of the fault line was a secret none of them had much liked keeping. It was almost like a party, but there were other strange currents that Tyler couldn't understand. "So that's it?" he asked. "There's just this big hole in the universe, in time or whatever, and it just happens to be here?" Gideon had been staring at his tea. "What? No, boy, it doesn't just happen to be here. Octavio Tinker went searching all over the world for a place like this. The only other spot that had the same likelihood turned out to be in the middle of the ocean, about 1,000 miles south of Madagascar. Not a great location for an experimental site." He grinned. "Octavio found the fault line. He bought the land. He built the house. I think I will have a little of that cider, Sarah." Mrs. Needle seemed about to say something disapproving, but kept her mouth closed, though her lips thinned to a line. "Shouldn't these children be getting to bed, Gideon?" she asked instead. "After all, they've had a very busy day, especially Tyler." "He had a bit of an adventure, that's all. Boys are sturdy. I know I was at that age." Oh, yes, but before Tyler did his chores, but before that Tyler did his chores, and then all that boyish larking around, messing about, chasing squirrels. He must be ready to sleep like the dead." She caught Tyler's gaze, and something flashed in her eyes, a cold, poisonous glint that made his heart flutter. "She knows," he thought. "She knows exactly what I did." "But, Uncle Gideon, what is the fault line, really?" Lucinda asked. "Did all people here just pop out of it? I still don't understand." Before their great uncle could answer, Sarah, Azinza, and Pema emerged from the back with a young woman Tyler at first didn't recognize. Her eyes were wide, as though at any moment she might have to run for her life. Her wet, reddish hair curled around her face, and she was draped in a colorful length of fabric far too long for her, one of Azinza's dresses. It was only when Tyler realized that the thin red lines on her face were doctored cuts that he realized it was the cave girl, last one. "Ah, our newest guest," said Gideon, with all the forced good fellowship of a department store Santa. "Hola! Welcome to the family. Someone get her some cider." "Don't be mad, Gideon," said Mrs. Needle. "She's probably never had strong drink in her life. If you could bring her some water, Sarah, and something to eat. Not too much, though, or she'll likely make herself sick." Tyler didn't like the way that Gideon had just taken away the girl's real name. He wanted to say again that she already had a name, a perfectly good one that meant something to her, but he knew he would simply be laughed into silence by the old man. He was dizzy with the warmth of the kitchen, and despite the nastiness of her intent, Mrs. Needle had been right. He was also extremely tired. "To go back to your question, Lucinda," said Gideon, "Octavio Tinker was decades ahead of his time. He deduced the existence of what he called the fifth dimensional transit, and then proved it when he found this place. I won't bother to try to explain it all. It's very complicated. But the simplest way to imagine it is that the first three dimensions are space, the fourth is time, and the fifth is probability." Gideon made a round shape with his hands, then indicated a straight line running through the middle of it. "The Earth has fifth-dimensional transit poles, just like it has magnetic poles. That's the point where the fifth dimension transits our four-dimensional space." He sat back with his cider, raised the glass, and took 2 large swallows. "So here's to old Octavio. He may have been a tight-fisted, mean-spirited son of a gun, but he sure proved all those other eggheads wrong, because we're sitting right on top of the fifth-dimensional transit, the place where our Earth comes into contact with all the other Earths it has ever been. And we don't even know about all the possible Earths. The fault line is a doorway into time." He sighed, suddenly looking as though the air had leaked out of him. "If only we knew how to navigate it, how to find our way back from inside it. You're lucky that Ice Age bit of it stayed open long enough to let you out, boy. You could have been lost in it forever." He looked down at his glass. Suddenly he seemed very old. "Lost forever." "Now, Gideon, you'll scare the children." Mrs. Needle had resumed her nice voice. She sounded like Mary Poppins. "Only this Mary Poppins rides a broomstick," Tyler thought, "not an umbrella." He didn't really understand what Gideon was talking about. He had found his own way out easily enough. Well, maybe easy wasn't the right word, but... "You mean you can't go into it and come out again?" Gideon shook his head sadly. We used to be able to navigate it. Octavio and my..." He stopped and took a breath. "Octavio had an instrument that allowed him to move in and out of the fault line. to travel through it like an explorer with a compass or a sailor with a sextant. It was called the continuoscope, but it was lost several years back. Suddenly, Tyler was wide awake. "That thing in the painting," he said, unaware for a moment he'd said it out loud. "Tyler!" Lucinda warned him, but it was too late. "What are you talking about, child?" Gideon demanded, his voice suddenly harsh. "What painting?" Tyler swallowed. It was too late to turn back. "There's a painting of Octavio Tinker in the library. He's holding something. It looks kind of like a weird musical instrument, right? And I always wondered what it was." Gideon stared at him with narrowed eyes. "And what were you doing in the library, boy?" "Just exploring. After my chores were done." For several heartbeats, no one said anything. Then the dangerous moment, and it had felt quite dangerous, abruptly passed. Gideon slumped back in his chair and took another gulp of cider. "Yeah, that was it, all right. The continuoscope. The world's only fifth-dimensional navigation device. It worked by crystallometry. Genius. Pure, elegant genius. But it's lost now." "But can't you make another one?" asked Lucinda. "Ha!" Gideon's laugh was bitter. "How could I replicate his genius, his secrets? The records are lost, too." "Lost?" He shook his head in defeated anger. "You don't understand how old Tinker worked, making sure that everyone around him knew only a little bit of what there was to know. Then, when it went wrong, there was nothing that could be done. Nothing." Something important had slipped past him in all the talk, Tyler realized. Some crucial detail, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He looked around. Ragnar and Sarah and the others were listening to the conversation, and everyone looked horribly tense. I'm pretty tired," Tyler said. It was not a sentence he would ever have imagined himself using, especially when it seemed so many questions could at last be asked and answered, but he was very aware that he was no longer thinking clearly, and if he accidentally gave away that he had found Octavio's diary, or that he had gone to the fault line by choice and then navigated his way out of it on his own, who knew what Gideon would do? Gideon looked into his emptying mug of cider. You two can go on up to your rooms. Plenty of time to talk later. We still have you for a while longer. Oh, but this is all top secret. You two made a promise, remember?" Gideon's eyes filled with dark emotions. "Sure." Tyler nodded and got to his feet. "We made you a promise." He swayed a little, and Lucinda stepped forward and put a hand under his elbow. "Come on," she said. "Good night, everybody." Tyler couldn't help noticing that a number of new, quiet conversations had already started in the room before they even reached the door. "Tyler," Lucinda whispered as they climbed the stairs, "you were so totally right about Mrs. Needle being a witch." He tried to concentrate while she told him about the kitchen conversation, but it only confirmed what he had already known in his heart. "Bad," he said. "She's bad. But there's more than that going on. They still haven't told us." He shook his head. "I can't think, Luce. Too tired. Tomorrow." "But there were people trying to get onto the property, Tyler. Mr. Walkwell caught one. And I think I heard the ghost. I heard it in my head. I'm scared, Tyler. I want to go home." "Are you kidding?" He was so exhausted he was slurring his words. "Things are just getting good." Tyler left his sister in the hallway. He managed only to kick off his shoes before he fell on the bed and tumbled down into a deep sleep.
Where did it go? There it is. Chapter 23. Come on. Oh, God. I don't know why this is so difficult. Chapter 23. The Lost and the Left Behind. Lucinda still found it hard to believe that Ragnar had been born more than 1,000 years ago. He looked like an ordinary man, somebody's motorcycle riding dad, maybe. She leaned over the cart. Are you really all from the past?
That question again. He smiled, but only barely. It is the past to you, child. To me, this is the future, although I would never have dreamed it to be so.
But how does that work? Asked Tyler. How did Gideon find you?
Ragnar shrugged. He was not looking for me. He was hunting for worms. Dragons, you would say, to bring back. He got me instead. As to how it all works, it is magic, whatever Gideon calls it, so I can tell you nothing about it. He gestured to the bags of feed stacked on the cart. Now, are you going to help me? Lucinda took a bucket and filled it with the damp mash that the sea goats liked. She threw handfuls over the fence and watched them scramble out of their shallow tub of water after it, sliding over the wet floor of their pen, hissing and bobbing their heads. She would miss feeding them and the other animals when they went home. It was hard to believe their time at the farm was almost over. But what was it like? She asked Ragnar at last. I do not know what you mean. When you first came here, were you scared? Now he did laugh, but it wasn't much happier than the smile. What I left behind, that was my death, and that was fearful. Coming here, I faced nothing worse than an unfamiliar place and a new tongue to learn. Of course, I did not understand that I had left my own time behind as well. You didn't know? Of course not, child, not at first. He heaved the broken cage up onto the cart. What was I to think? It was strange enough that I had escaped the doom that was upon me. When I came to this place, I saw only a farm at first. Oh, tell me about it. Lucinda went back for another bucket of mash. I really want to hear. How did Gideon find his way around? Tyler asked. Was it really that continuoscope thing? How did it work? That craft is beyond me. And anyway, the device is gone. He shook his head. Sometimes it seems that everything good in this place has been lost. What do you mean? Lucinda asked. This place is amazing. Ragnar lifted several of the heavy sacks off and dropped them to the ground with a dusty thump. The friends I've met here tell me we Norsemen are a gloomy lot. Still, I cannot help thinking this house, and perhaps all the magic of this place, is cursed. Certainly it has seemed so since the night Gideon's wife disappeared. Disappeared? Lucinda thought of the room, so full of pictures of the dark-haired woman that it had seemed like a religious shrine. I thought she died. Nothing so simple. He frowned. She was swallowed by the fault line. For a moment, Lucinda couldn't speak. She felt cold all over. Swallowed? That is what I call it. I do not speak Gideon's tongue of science. She went in, and she did not come out. It was the most ill-fated night of all. Where? Tyler demanded. Where was she when it happened? Ragnar gave him a strange look. I do not know. Somewhere in the fault line. It is the family's gift, but it is also a curse, I sometimes think. He looked up suddenly, his face stricken. I am sorry. Gods, I am a fool. Why are you sorry? Lucinda asked. Because I have called your family cursed. Lucinda had to think about it for a moment before she understood. Oh, right, I keep forgetting that we're related to Gideon. Not to Gideon, in truth, Ragnar said. To his wife, and through her to Octavio himself. Now Tyler was the puzzled one. What does that mean? You are of the Tinker clan. Grace was a tinker, Octavio's granddaughter. Gideon and Grace never had children. You are not related by blood to Gideon, but to Octavio. So is that why we're here? Said Tyler slowly. Me and Lucinda? Because we're old Octavio's blood relations? Ragnar heaved up another bunch of feed sacks. I do not know why you are here, boy. Gideon has many thoughts he does not share with me. Still, I am glad you two came. It has brought some new life to this place, life that was needed. He looked almost wistful. Lucinda felt as though she was suddenly seeing things clearly that she had only glimpsed before through a fog. So Gideon married into the family? Yes. It was against Octavio's wishes, at least at first, Ragnar said. Gideon came to work with the old man and helped him build his device, but he also fell in love with Octavio's granddaughter, who he had seen grow from a child to a woman. There was much anger, at least at first, when the two of them married. Octavio was angry? So I am told. But he came to accept it at last. And for some years things were good. Then came the bad night, when Grace vanished into the fault line and was lost. That same night, Octavio Tinker's heart failed, and he died. Oh, my God, Lucinda said. That's so terrible. How did it all happen? Ragnar shook his head. I was not there. It is not my story to tell. Already I have talked and talked. Talked too much. We have work to do. Besides, what more do you need to know? The whole sad story is in these words. Gideon lost his wife and his thane on the same night. His thane? What's that mean? Tyler asked. Ah, it is not a word of your time, but mine. The one who held his oath, his lord, you might say. This is America, Tyler told him. We don't have lords. Ragnar's half-smile returned. Words change. Men do not. In all ways, Octavio was Gideon's lord, but it was the loss of Grace that crippled him. He searched years for her, until the continuoscope was lost too. He looked around and lowered his head a little between his big shoulders, and said quietly, He was already a little mad, I think, when the continuoscope was lost in the laboratory fire, and he could not even search for her any more. He shook his head. So she just disappeared into the fault line, Tyler said slowly. Lucinda could not help noticing the strange expression on her brother's face. He was lost in thought, staring at nothing, as if he was on the last level of some game and completely absorbed. Why was he zoning out when they were finally getting some answers? Why did Gideon bring you and the others here? She asked. The big man snorted. You would rather talk than work, I see. He brought us because he needed workers to keep the farm going. Workers who will keep the secrets. Tyler abruptly stood up. I have to go back to the house. He turned and headed off at a trot. What about your chores, boy? Ragnar called. I'll be back, honest. Lucinda stared after him, wondering what was going on. She had a sinking feeling that she was going to wind up doing his share of the work as well as her own. A hot, sweaty hour or so later, Ragnar finally sent her back to the house to get lunch while he went to talk to Mr. Walkwell about some fencing. Lucinda was rinsing the worst of the dust off her face and hands at the faucet outside the sick barn when she felt the hairs at the back of her neck begin to rise. She even looked around to see if someone was standing behind her, but no one was in sight. She was alone with the concrete bulk of the huge barn. Then the weird, powerful sense of someone else's feelings flooded into her again, bringing a sense of loss as sudden and shocking as being doused with a bucket of cold, cold water. Lost, lost, lost. Her first impulse was to run away. But how could she run away from thoughts in her own head? Lucinda lifted her hands to her cheeks and found they were wet. The force of the misery, whoever's misery it was, had brought her to tears. Go away, ghost, she thought desperately. Leave me alone. But it would not go away, and she spun in helpless circles, holding her head. It was only then, as though she had turned toward the sun with eyes closed and felt its heat, that she realized she could tell where the painful, unhappy thoughts were coming from. The sick barn. Lucinda looked around, but there was still no one in sight. She walked slowly to the front of the great concrete tube. The overwhelming sense of someone else's misery was growing a little less, but it still battered her mind like a strong wind. The door to the sick barn was open, propped with a stone so it wouldn't latch shut. Lucinda poked her head in, heart beating fast, and prepared for almost anything. But there was little to see. In fact, except for the huge bulk of Meseret sprawled in sleep, tethered to the floor with massive bands of canvas, and some movement in some of the smaller pens and cages, the place seemed empty. But who had left the door propped? And whose terrible, mournful thoughts had invaded her mind? Was it the ghost in the library mirror? Or something worse, some horror conjured up out of its natural time and place by Gideon's fault line? And then Meseret's great red-gold eye flicked open, as if a gypsy fortune-teller had lifted the cloth cover off a crystal ball. The long, narrow reptilian pupil widened a little, and several ideas thundered in her brain at the same time. Not egg thief! What want here? So sad, so sad. Lucinda didn't hear individual words, but instead felt the meanings, with the suddenness that a splash of paint would shout, "Red!" As the alien ideas cascaded over her, a sudden clear understanding came with them. The voice she had been hearing in her head, the mournful thoughts that she had mistaken for ghosts, had come from Meseret. The dragon was in her head. Lucinda's first impulse was to turn and run, but the misery that she could feel as clearly as heat or cold held her. The immense reptile let out a floor-rumbling groan and tried to stand, but the heavy canvas restraining straps, each one as wide as a bedsheet, kept her belly against the floor and her winged forelegs pinned against her sides. "Oh, you poor thing," Lucinda said, then trailed off in sudden fear as the dragon stopped struggling and turned her terrifying eye on Lucinda. I'm sorry you're tied up," she said, her voice little more than a squeak. I'm so sorry your baby, died." Now, as if her idea had leaped between them in the same way the dragon's thoughts had jumped to Lucinda, the dragon shuddered and shook her massive head from side to side as if to shake it free of something. Lucinda guessed from the slowness of the great beast's movements that Meseret was drugged. "No, dead." Drugged or not, Meseret could still make the inside of Lucinda's head rattle like it was thunderstruck. "No, dead. Taken." It took Lucinda a moment to make sense of the thoughts. "Taken? You mean by Alamu?" It hadn't occurred to her until that moment that it might not be very smart to argue with a giant winged monster 40 feet long, especially one that was clearly angry and upset. But instead of the burst of anger she feared, or even a scorching belch of fire which could reach her even where she was standing, she abruptly realized, what came to her was only a squall of misery, like cold wind and dark clouds. Not little worm, not him, lost, taken, everything gone. And then there were images with the ideas, pictures in her head that Lucinda could not make sense of. A setting sun, a tangle of bones, a cliff wall of sheer red stone looming above drifts of sand. No quickening, no baby. Lucinda saw an image of something that was neither a dragon baby nor a human infant, more of a shining point of light, like a welcoming door opened into darkness. Gone! It was too much. The power of the dragon's thoughts, the strangeness of them. It felt like having a stranger pull on her arm and shout in her face in a foreign language, shrieking for help. Lucinda took a few stumbling steps backward. Something creaked behind her, and she saw Haneb standing in the doorway, pulling his protective hood back on as he returned from somewhere outside, his scarred face wide-eyed with surprise to find Lucinda standing beside the dragon's pen. A moment later, she was rocked off her feet by Meseret's bellow of anger and pain, her ears popping with the pressure. Egg thief! The thoughts crashed through Lucinda's head like an avalanche, almost knocking her down again, even as she struggled to rise. Him! This one! Egg thief! Haneb hurried toward her, head down as though he crossed a battlefield beneath a hail of bullets. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet, then yanked her toward the door. What are you doing? He shouted, his voice muffled by the hood, his eyes frantic behind the faceplate. He grabbed her arm and began pulling her. No, suit! Dangerous! Come away! Come away now! He can't hear what she said, Lucinda thought. He can't hear her thoughts like I can. It's you, she said wonderingly as they reached the door. Behind her, the dragon groaned. She's calling you a thief. She says you took it. What? Haneb still had his hood on, but his startled look was easy to see even through the protective mask. What you saying? Meseret, the dragon. She says you stole her egg. For a moment his eyes widened even farther, as though they might leap right out of his skull. Then Haneb turned on his heels and ran away from her across the farmyard. And that's where we're stopping for the night, because that's the end of the chapter. See, next comes chapter 24, which is called Squirrel Meets World. Anyway, so I hope y'all enjoyed that. We'll get back to we'll do a scary story again sometime. Who knows? Maybe I'll read one of the scary stories after I finish, because we've only got a couple of weeks left. So it'll still be the scary season, really. But other than that, I think I'm just about ready to wrap up for the night. So as always, I want to thank you for joining me. It's a great pleasure to have you. I hope that you are enjoying your Halloween evening wherever you are. I hope if you are in trick-or-treating territory that you are getting territorial trick-or-treaters. I hope if you're not in trick-or-treating territory, either because your country doesn't do that or because, like me, you live someplace that the trick-or-treaters never get to, because in fact it is too isolated and too scary, and weird old people and weird young people live there. I hope you're enjoying Halloween in any variety of other ways. And remember, little tiny candies go on sale tomorrow. So that's something to enjoy about the holiday. Meanwhile, for the Casa Beale Williams, I thank you for joining me on this Halloween, or Samhain, as one of my friends said today to me when she greeted me. Happy Samhain, happy Halloween, happy All Saints Day tomorrow to those of you for whom that is a meaningful thing. Happy Dia de los Muertos for those who have been doing that. And yeah, it's good to see you. We will be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. I don't know whether we have our daylight savings time before then or not, but I will continue doing 1 a.m. my time early Sunday morning and 7 p.m. my time Sunday evening, at least for the next couple of weeks. So that's what all you need to know, is to know what time it is in California, and you'll know what time I'll be doing the reading. And I hope you will all come back and join me. Drag a few friends along. We'll toast some marshmallows. We'll make some s'mores. Okay? Okay. So thank you very much. Happy Halloween. Peace. And